Dave D asked me if I had done my Tony Robbins energy yells. And I told him Bill does the yells for both of us, so you missed that. He was out earlier in the hall doing his yells and his whoa-yays or yay-woes or, you know, hand claps and all that stuff. So if you'd gotten here earlier, you could have seen that. I said last night to the IBAs, I spent all day yesterday with a client, Harvey Zemmel, who's here from London, and all day long it occurred to me, you know, the proximity of doing a consulting day with somebody and then the next day teaching them what you were doing to them, you know, probably would have been better with a little time lapse, you know, gone by. But so here we are, and for starters, a reminder of what you are at. What you are not at is a session about any of the basics of either the consulting or the coaching business. Any that work their way in will be by accident or as part of an answer to a question, but I will limit that so there's a certain amount of presumed knowledge in the room, and if you lack it, you'll have to go get it after the fact, backwards. So, like, I'm not going to spend much time on the 12 ways you can structure a coaching program and, you know, that sort of thing. This is largely about the handling of the client. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about the client as a member of a coaching program or the client as a one-on-one coaching or consulting relationship. I'll use the word client interchangeably, and most of what we talk about applies to any and all of those circumstances. And so mostly we're going to be talking about the getting of, although most of that will be tomorrow, and the control of, and the extracting of maximum money from, and the keeping of, and the multiplying of. And so that's what we're going to spend most of our time on. And some of it will be, I don't know, emotionally uncomfortable for some of you, I am sure, because I'm not going to take the time to, every time I talk about a tactic, I'm not going to take the time to make you feel ethically, morally, spiritually, and metaphysically healthy about it. I'll take the time to do that maybe 2 or 3 times during the entire day. But so some of what we're going to be talking about, I mean, is literally, you know, about how to, without them noticing it, pick their pockets. And if that is really troubling to you, you know, you may have a tough day. There is a certain amount of, when I prepared this, there's a certain amount of what I call the world's longest beard problem, which is an old story about the guy with the world's longest beard, and they go to interview him up in the mountains of West Virginia, and the interviewer asks him, does he sleep with the beard under the covers or outside the covers, and he never got a good night's sleep again. And so there's a certain amount of things that I long ago stopped doing consciously that I now do unconsciously. You know, I've trained myself to do them and do them all the time and never give them any thought. And I realize I'm actually now doing them when I don't need to do them anymore, and actually it's not necessarily congruent with my objectives, and I'm still doing it because I ingrained it. But it's sometimes hard to consciously back all that out and enunciate it in conscious instructions. I have done my best. But again, you will get more out of me if you ask me questions, because you may provoke something that it did not occur to me while I was preparing. You may have observed something about what I do or what Bill does or what Glazer Kennedy does that we are doing unconsciously, and I may not mention it unless you ask about it. And by the way, most people, including most Glazer Kennedy members, come and go viewing us on only one level. So if they come to a super conference, they get out of it what's on the educational, motivational, entertaining level for them. And so they hear the speakers, they take notes about what the speakers say, they meet people, they network, etc. What they don't do on a simultaneous mental track is observe how we're doing that super conference and try and figure out why we're doing this way and why we're doing this way. I have one client for years who, his whole note-taking thing, it has 3 pads, and one is content, one is why are they doing it the way they're doing it, and one is how can I apply that to my business. So the thing that you should know, and that will become abundantly apparent from me during the 2 days that we're together, is that pretty much nothing you see us do is just accidental or random. It's all pretty strategic and thought out, and if to the point of unconscious now, it was originally consciously thought out. But to use a conference as an example, there's meticulous thought about body movement and where this thing gets positioned in a room and what speaker goes in front of what speaker and how many minutes everybody gets and what gets said first when somebody steps to the stage, and on and on and on and on and on. And so the same is true pretty much with everything I do. And so if you're really, really astute and you really make a point of it, there's a sort of multi-layered educational value in getting the newsletter, for example. You can read it for pure entertainment, and it is built to facilitate that. You can read it just to get marketing ideas and examples, but then you could read it on the 3rd layer of how is it structured and why is it being done in a certain way in order to get a member, keep a member, ascend a member, get money from a member. And so really there's a whole nother way to study that piece that you get from us. That most people, it does not occur to them, and quite frankly, that's okay. I'm not sure it's beneficial to us to have it occur to everybody. I'm just pointing it out to you because you paid your money. I'm not actually sure that having done this was very smart. With 20/20 hindsight, as I prepared it, but here we are. So there is this layer of what are they up to? Why did they do this? Why did he talk about this? Why did he put this in the newsletter, etc. That for the people in this room, I think is sort of important, and that you ought to be paying attention to. You have a big fat take-home book in front of you. We're mostly going to work out of the book. Today we're going to deal with sections 1 through 3 and some of the sample documents, and tomorrow we're going to deal with sections 4 and 5 and the rest of the sample documents. So let's get started. If you jump, there are page numbers shortly. The first few pages in front of section 1 aren't numbered, so if you just jump into, I don't know, just a couple pages in, 2 or 3 pages in, you're going to find a page that looks like this. And I just wanted to briefly mention some of the things that are very, very relevant to what we're going to be talking about in the next 2 days. One is that I've been in the consulting business since the beginning. I did something else for 1 year after getting out of high school, and then at least some part of my life was consulting and taking money from people for dispensing advice and opinions and eventually dispensing work product. In the earliest years, and in the years when I paid the least attention to it, there wasn't a year that I made less than $100K, and that goes back to 1975, when $100K was some serious money. And in terms of coaching, we didn't call it that then, but my earliest experience with coaching was in what was called, and still is, called practice management in chiropractic and dental. And in, what year? 1977, 1978, 1979, somewhere in there. We were selling a $30,000, what we would now call coaching program, to chiropractors, when $30,000 was serious money. And it's interesting that in a sense nothing much changes. This is the old original brochure from that, and here's what they got for their $30,000. They got actually we gave more than we do today. They got 8 mastermind meetings. They got 2 staff training seminars. They got system-oriented training, meaning what you do in your office, which really is a fancy word for they got a big notebook like you just got. They got non-system training, meaning the head trip stuff and communication skills and so forth, which really means they got a second big notebook like you just got. They got a complete set of audio and video materials. They got a monthly newsletter. They got a monthly staff newsletter. They had monthly accountability, which is pretty painless giving them because only like 2% of them use monthly accountability. So with monthly accountability in this coaching program was fill out a 4-page form about what happened in your practice this month and fax it in before your one-on-one coaching call. Well, you never saw forms because if you ask people to do something, continuing telephone consulting, so they had a coach assigned to them that they talked to on a regular basis, and an initial training like a fast start day that they came to. And so we were selling that for $30,000 in either 77, 78, or 79. I lose track. And at peak, that business had 600 and some odd doctors at $30,000 a piece a year. So this is not like new, and what may be new to you isn't any more than the Tony Yell is new. It goes back a long, long, long way, at least to the Emile Coué, Dave, what, 30s, 40s? 30s? So there's not a lot new under the sun. It may be new to you. It's certainly new to your clients. It keeps getting kind of a new wrapper around it. But a lot of what we're doing and a lot of what you're going to see during these 2 days has some pretty deep roots. Significant for me and significant about what we're going to talk about is that I've maintained over 70% of my client relationships for long periods of years. There are clients with me for 10 years. There's clients with me for 20 years. There's a few with me going on 25 years. And even as my compensation demands have escalated and escalated and escalated far out of pace with the rate of inflation, they stay and they keep coming back. Now, I don't mention that so much to brag as to say to you, there's like a science to that, because the getting of clients is the most expensive thing you'll ever do. And initially, if all of that is new to you, it'll be an exciting thing to do. When somebody says yes, and somebody writes out a check and signs a contract, or somebody joins a program, you will be incredibly excited and enthused about that. But give it a few years, and it will be a routine and necessary event. It will not be the thing that is exciting. And so the retention of the client becomes ever more important. And so I've got people in coaching who've been with me for 10 years in coaching groups. And what is, as an aside, what is significant about that is that they've long since stopped being there for the core reasons of the coaching. They could all conduct a coaching meeting in my absence. So their retention is about something other than that. And it is the something other than that that is pretty important. And the third part of that is that all of that goes on with me being very dictatorial. And as one client pointed out, you could make that a play on words. In my relationships with my clients. And so they're staying around and continuing to give me money and asking to give me money more than I will take it and asking me to do more than I am willing to do with me dictating to them virtually every aspect of the relationship and being rather difficult to deal with by most standards. Now, there's two lessons in that, and we'll get to them as we go along. So some people will say, well, you can do that with entrepreneurs, but you can't do it with corporate clients. You can. I have had and have now major corporate clients. I don't seek them. I haven't had a lot of them because they're a giant pain in the rear. But you can do it. Everything we'll talk about in these 2 days is equally applicable to a Fortune 1000 client, if that happens to be the kind of field you're in, as it is to an entrepreneur client, or as it is if you're a high-end financial planner, or you're a cosmetic dentist, or you're a cosmetic surgeon, to the individual consumer you might be sitting across the desk from. All of the same principles, all of the same strategies apply equally. And so my clients have included Fortune 5s, Fortune 1s, those giving $1 million at a time instead of 30,000 at a time. The zeros, the numbers change. The strategies, the arrangements, the management of the client does not change. And so it's very important to get my business is different, my client is different, my customer is different out of your head, if at all possible, sometime in the next 5 minutes, so it doesn't get in your way during the next 20 some odd hours. And I got to tell you, everybody in this room conceptually knows that that should be out of your way. Many of you are now turning around and teaching it to people that know your business is not different. But that doesn't mean you still don't have in your head, my business is different. I did 2 consulting days this week, and one of them I did with people who've been with me for a number of years and are pretty successful and pretty smart and conceptually know it, intellectually know it, and yet sit there the whole day saying things that reflect a belief system that, yeah, but our clients are really different. And in fact, I will hear often from people, I know our business isn't different, but, and then they will proceed to tell you the 5 reasons why their business is really different. And so even those of you who are now turning around and teaching to other people that know their businesses really aren't different, it's very easy to have it creep back into your own head about your business or your clients or your situation. And anytime it creeps in, it's self-sabotage, it's in the way. Because what I'm talking about here is absolutely universal. And my career experience kind of proves it. I would point out that these sort of methods work just as well for amateurs and novices as they do for experienced professionals. And probably the best evidence that you can go from 0 to 60 in coaching and or consulting without necessarily much background in it, is the Glazer Kennedy Independent Business Advisor Program that we created. About half the room here is made up of people who are independent business advisors, although they are all part-time, some spare time. They all have other things that they're doing. Some of them have other coaching or consulting businesses, but some of them do not. And they are lickety-split, got coaching groups formed, and are making $10,000 a month, $15,000 a month, $20,000 a month in their local areas. In some cases, including people, and I don't want to embarrass them, but including people in the room who couldn't spell coach, before we got them, and they're merrily coaching and taking money for it. So you also should not have in your head that you need another 13 years before you dare do some of these things. Almost everything that I'll talk about in these 2 days, I'm mostly talking about what I do now, but 90% of it is the same as what I did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, including when I could ill afford to do it economically, or when I had absolutely no qualifications or recognition or any of that in order to base it on. And so I'll often hear from people when I discuss this stuff with them privately, I'll get the, yeah, but you're Dan Kennedy and I'm Charlie Rabinowitz, who nobody knows, so I don't dare do that stuff. They miss the point that to get to be Dan Kennedy, I did that stuff. It's not, you gotta wait. It really is, this business is a lot about cart before horse, not horse before cart. The last thing I'll say, sort of in preparation about all this, is that I'm basically telling you what I do. There's more than one way to be right. All right? I can only tell you my way because that's what I do. Occasionally I'll show you somebody else's example, but there is more than one way to be right. However, I can tell you my way is a way to be right. And so if you're looking for a model that works, you came to the right place. So question yourself whether you should disagree or not. I did want to quickly show you. Some people are here and some people aren't here. Here's this year's Platinum group, and I wanted to make mention of a few people. I know Ron Carruthers is here because I saw him this morning. Where are you? Okay, Ron's over here. Ron is in the consulting business, essentially financial consulting for families belatedly getting ready to try and get their kids into good colleges. And would you, actually, I want to hear from you. Would you jump up here? And let's see, who else is here? You, Michael, Tucker. Is O'Keefe here? No. Laurent's not here. Dave D. And Charlie Martin. I know you guys are all here. If you would jump up here very quick. Just give you a sense of diversity of what's going on. Ron, you first. Grab the mic if you would. Actually, first of all, do me a favor and stand up. Okay. And face the crowd. Okay. Just take a good look at them. All right. Now imagine you're a 55-year-old, fairly successful guy with gray hair who's thinking about getting your kid into Harvard. Is this exactly the look of the person? It just shows you can, we're going to talk about costuming later. You can defy it. And you can still, and you look like you just crawled out of bed, too. Did you just crawl out of bed? Yeah. Okay, so very quickly, describe your business, the fees, how it works.
I deal with all the parents who forgot to save money for college, and we roughly take 150 to 200 new clients a year. We charge $3,000 to $5,000 for them per student to come in and have us basically handle stuff for them. Okay.
You want to say the fee again?
$3,000 to $5,000.
Yeah, okay. And where was it 3 years ago?
$1,100.
Okay. That's the point I wanted to make. And how much of what you deliver has changed?
Nothing. I mean, we packaged it up, and the gift basket they get for writing the $3,000 check is nicer than the one they got for the $1,100 check, but that's
core value.
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay. It's a really important demonstration. Okay. And actually, you could like leave now and you'd have your money's worth. But describe it, and let's talk about speed. Your coaching business.
Right, coaching plus business, teaching other mortgage. I'm in the mortgage business, sort of. What's that? Oh, Mike Midget, St. Louis. Sorry about that.
He said 9?
9?
9?
I have a name. I'm in the mortgage business.
It's immediately reminiscent of Peter Sellers' Pink Panther. Boom, boom.
I teach other mortgage brokers how to do what I do where they live, which is essentially, just to keep it simple, teach homeowners how to eliminate all their debt using the equity in their home, which kind of sounds backwards, but now doing a coaching plus program for these brokers. It's monthly $1,500 a month, and they get everything I do taught by me to them, all my vendors, all my processes, presentations, marketing pieces, everything.
And fee?
$1,500 a month.
Okay. And how many you got?
60.
And how fast did you get there?
Real quick.
Yeah, well.
Well, in the beginning of last September, I had 6, and by the end of September, I had 55, and we moved into the 60s the month after that with the seminar.
Okay. Let's save you for last. Dave, let's go back to you and talk about consulting first.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
So.
Okay. Dave D., we got 2 different coaching groups. One is a private coaching group where I'm getting one-on-one coaching. I charge $30,000 a person plus 5% of their business. So that works out pretty well. And then the other one that I just started was an information marketing coaching group, which is $10,000 a year. And we just started it. So in 2 days, we put in 20 members. So it worked out pretty well.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Charlie?
I'm Charlie Martin. I'm a dentist from Richmond, Virginia, and I have a dental practice and I have a coaching program. And my program is a membership exclusive area program. We have 28 in it right now, and it's a 2-year commitment. It's $55,000.
Okay. And when did you start?
First meeting was September.
Okay.
I'm Scott Tucker. I'm a subprime loan officer and mortgage broker in Chicago. I do only subprime refinances, no purchases, no prime A paper business. I have 165 coaching members paying $1,500 a month, so that's $3 million a year. And I did it in about the first year and a half I had that many members. And so it can be done very quickly. And what Mike didn't tell you is he had 6 members for almost 9 months, and then he went to 60 members in 2 or 3 months. So it can be done very quickly if you allow yourself to do that.
Thank you, gentlemen. You may return. Okay. Who gets what I just did, and more importantly, why I did it?
Yeah, just this case?
Hmm? Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I took the time to, whatever terminology you want to use for it, but to establish authority, even though you guys all know me, and we already have a pre-existent relationship. And obviously, you pretty much bought into the fact that I have the right to teach this thing, or you wouldn't have written the check and been here in the first place. But in spite of all that, I took the time to establish the specific authority for the specific topic that we're going to spend 2 days on, in part through demonstration. Now, why go to all that trouble? Right? Well, first of all, how long has it been since you read the sales letter that brought you here? Well, for a few of you, a day or two, but for most of you, perhaps probably weeks or a month or 2 months, which means you don't remember the sales letter that brought you here. So everything I said in the sales letter that got you here has long since left your mind. And it isn't just about remaking the sale. It is about getting control of you for the next 2 days. And so I have taken the time to go back through a reestablish my right to sit up here and talk to you about this topic. Okay? It's an extremely important lesson. And by lesson, what I mean is that it pretty much needs to happen every single time. You cannot operate on the basis of, we've had a relationship for 3 years, so they know me, he knows me, she knows me. I don't need to resell them. I don't need to remind them of why they're giving me money. And I don't need to retake control. Yes, you do. Virtually every single time. So virtually every single time you put them in a coaching room, every single time you sit down with them one-on-one, there should be some exercise. It may only be 5 minutes, maybe all it takes, but there should be some exercise of reestablishing what the relationship is, meaning you, whatever your position is, brilliant, genius, experienced, old, grizzled, wise veteran of your industry, a person extremely adept at making people rich in a hurry, whatever your position is, you need to reestablish it, and you need to reestablish the relationship, which is me chief, you Indian, me instructor, you student, right? And so don't miss the point. Let's start on page 1, which should be immediately after your tabbed divider. You should find a page that looks like that. Few very quick things to say about it. Just about everything that I do is completely contrary to what would be taught to you about the coaching or the consulting business from any traditional source. So, for example, if you happen to go to Coach University or some variation of it, no disrespect to those folks, or if you hang out in the coach subsection special interest group of the National Speakers Association, or you go to the bookstore and buy a book about this, you are going to find a very different set of premises about these businesses than our premises. First of all, you are going to find that they are mired in a hours for dollars culture. And so it's all about how to charge $75 an hour to talk to somebody on the phone, and isn't this cool? Or how to make $750 a day or $1,000 a day. So the entire culture is all about trading a block of time for a block of money. As a practical matter, first of all, that's not a business, just so you know, that's a job. And secondly, it has no leverage, it has no multiplier effect. Therefore, you will eventually reach a point where you actually can only get so much from them per hour or per dollar, and regardless of value, they won't give you any more, and you will eventually be unhappy with it because you will be capped. And there's only so many hours, and you can only stand to do what you do so long. And so ultimately, every psychologist doesn't want to be a psychologist anymore, and every lawyer doesn't want to be a lawyer anymore, and every CPA doesn't want to be a CPA anymore because they're like stuck. They get to a certain point and they're stuck. And in this pure exchange of dollars for time, from your standpoint or from my standpoint, see what we do for them, we can't take enough money from them for it to be an accurate representation of the value. So if in a day I take a guy with $1 million a year business and I re-engineer the business so he goes home and has a $10 million a year business, arguably I should have gotten $9 million for the day, and he can start making his money the second year. But see, I don't care how good I am at everything I'm going to show you these 2 days, getting somebody to write the $9 million check for the day, it's like too much. All right? I mean, maybe there's somebody out there getting it that I don't know yet, but it's like too much. If you go to a therapist for 6 sessions and they save your marriage, how much is that worth? Well, it's worth a lot more than anybody is willing to pay them. Now, some therapists get a lot more than others because of these techniques, but still, the therapist is grossly underpaid. The client ultimately feels they are overpaying because they are viewing it as an exchange of minutes for money. And so Billy Bob, who's your client, sits down and figures out how much he's making in his business per hour, right? Well, I make $140 an hour, and I'm paying this lunatic $5,000 an hour. Something's wrong here, right? So the entire premise is like suicidal. It eventually leads to everybody being unhappy. The clients are unhappy, you're unhappy, everybody's unhappy. So you got to get out of that box in as many different ways as you can. And you should know that all of the traditional training, and so if you go hang around with any of the traditionalists, they are all about putting you in that box and staying in that box. And they have a disapproving viewpoint of everything that is done outside of that box. Our $30,000 coaching program for doctors in the late 1970s was sold has cash out of percentage above base. So very quickly, let me explain that to you. Percentage above base is a way of getting paid. We'll talk about it later. Its pros and its cons and whatever. But percentage above base is essentially, in that case, sitting down with the doctor and saying, okay, how much did you do last year? Okay, I did $100,000. I'll do simple numbers so I can try and do them. I did $100,000. Okay, and the rate of inflation is 10%. So we're going to say, and how much growth did you have last year over the year before? 10%. Okay, so rate of inflation 10, growth 10, so we're going to give you 20. So we're going to set your base at $120,000 for the first year of the agreement. We're going to roll another 20 on it and set the base for $140,000 the second year. We're going to put another 20% on it then and set it at 100 and whatever that would be, $168,000, $178,000, whatever that is for the third year. That's your base, okay? And now we get 30% of everything that gets created above base. Okay, well, they'll agree to that, by the way, because it's air, right? And they don't believe it's going to happen anyway. But then, if you can convince them that they're going to go to $500,000 every year and you pencil out what they're going to wind up paying you, but they can discount all that out by giving you $30,000 all at one time, it becomes pretty easy to get the $30,000, especially if you can manage to get them financed. Now, you got to have somebody who sleeps on the couch with them and carries them to the bank in the morning in order to get them financed. But so that's how that's sold. What's important about all that is I'm just giving you an example of how we got out of the box of talking about hours. See, what we're going to deliver now is irrelevant. It's the money outcome that is relevant. The second thing is that all of the traditionalists have an academic orientation about these businesses. And by that I mean two things. Number one, they're hung up on credentials and qualifications and certifications and do you have the appropriate letters of the alphabet after your name to allow you to consult with people in this subject area or to coach people in this subject area. What is extremely important to understand about that is nobody cares except the people issuing the letters of the alphabet after the name. No one else cares. The marketplace does not care at all. It's not an advantage, it's not a disadvantage, it's not, and by and large, they don't ask. I maybe 5 times in 30 years have been directly asked if I went to college. Maybe 5 times. And maybe another 5 times indirectly because they assume. And so the question is, what school did you go to? You know, oh, where'd you graduate from? I mean, you know, so the assumption's there. But nobody has, like, refused to write the check. So it doesn't matter. But they're all about, okay, these permissions to go do these businesses. And you don't need anybody's permission to do any of it. You just go do it. The other thing is that the academic orientation leads them to ladder thinking. Now, ladder thinking is very important for you to get everybody else to do. Okay? You want to show everybody you take money from ladders, because they've all been conditioned to climb one if you stick it in front of them. Right? So you want to be sticking one in front of them, and as soon as they get to the top of that one, you want to be sticking another one in front of them, and another one in front of them, and another one in front of them, because they'll climb it. Okay? But it's very important for you never to climb one. Okay? So you got to show other people ladders, but if somebody shows you a ladder, you got to laugh at it. Because you got to know that a bunch of us sat in a room and figured out the ladder. And we figured out the ladder for one reason and one reason only, to control people. That's why we figured it out. And so Boy Scouts of America has a ladder. A bunch of people sat in a room and figured it out so they could control the kids and the parents. That's what it's there for. And it isn't there for any other reason. And so it is with every single ladder, including some I could mention that would probably offend some people. So, you know, it's really, really important for you to laugh at them, but to make sure you construct them, because it's one of the best ways to control people. Last, they're all mired in poverty consciousness. If you had most Coach U folks, if you had some Coach U folks here, and you had some NSA culture coaches here, and you had some, what's the other, Life Coach Institute graduates here, and you had a few MBAs and Booz Allen consultants, and you know, we had 40 or 50 of them hanging around here. And we let them hear just what was said at the table a few minutes ago. They would either all run screaming from the room, or they would be trying to get our certifications yanked from wherever the devil we got them in the first place. Okay? Because how dare you charge that kind of money? And, you know, I mean, it would start there. Okay? So they are mired in their own version of a poverty outlook. Okay? They have in their head, you should only be able to make so much an hour, and that's so much better than what everybody else makes an hour, so that's fair. There's a sort of a, you know, there's a continuous conversation going on about the ratio between CEO pay and worker pay, and how there should be some sort of formulaic multiple between what the CEO gets. It should only be 16 times what the lowest paid worker gets. It shouldn't be 18 times, and it certainly shouldn't be 180 times, and it certainly shouldn't be 1,800 times what the lowest worker gets. This conversation, by the way, has been going on since the Industrial Revolution. It ain't a new debate. Okay? And it was being screamed about Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie then, and it's being screamed about, you know, now. Admittedly, the multiple's gotten a little bigger, but so has the value differential. It ignores where does the value come from in the conversation. Well, these people have sort of the same kind of multiple formula in their heads of, okay, our clients make X, so we should only make, a psychiatrist makes X, so we should only make X, a lawyer makes X, so we should only make X. And so if you hang around them, that's what you get in your head, and you don't want it there, okay? Your monetary compensation is based on a combination of actual value, as value is defined by the recipient, not as it is defined by you, and what you can get. Right? Those are the two criteria. And so Carruthers is such a great example because $1,100, $35,000. Well, which would you rather have? Is it unconscionable? Well, not if a sufficient number of people are willing to pay it. That determines it's perfectly conscionable. Right? They should get to choose, not the National Board of College Planning Consultants, if there is such a thing. They shouldn't get a vote. Lou Dobbs shouldn't get a vote. If enough people are willing to pay $35,000 for that service, then that tells you the service is worth $35,000 to enough people to at least support him. Mm-hmm. And it immediately says, gee, maybe they'll pay $37,800. And that doesn't sound like much, but how many deals did you do last year? Excuse me, how many clients did you take care of last year?
100 to 150 a year.
Well, so if it's 100 a year and we go from 35 to 37.8, it doesn't make any difference to the client, but it does make $280,000 difference to him. So, we got to think about that, right? So you want to ignore almost everything you hear from traditional sources. Your next page. In a sense, almost everything we do today will have to do with this. In another sense, it won't, because I'll be as practical and pragmatic as I can. But the truth is, most of the success in the coaching and consulting businesses has to do with what's going on in your head more than anything else. It has to do with your attitudes about yourself and about money, your bravado, the size of your cojones, your ability to keep a straight face when you quote a fee, those sorts of things. And they really are self-image related. They're attitudinal related. And they are not really related to anything else. So what's kind of important to understand is that there are no moorings for this business. Now, in almost all other businesses, they're mistaken too, but a lot of businesses have, sort of a relationship somehow that leads to price. So in retail, it's double it. Buy it for 50 cents, sell it for 100. In direct response TV, it's 8 to 10 times. And so the first thing that happens in a conversation about doing anything on direct response TV is we got to have an 8 to 10 times multiple of product cost. So if it costs $1, we got to be able to sell it for $8 or $10. If we can't sell it for $8 or $10, we're not going to do it, and we're probably not going to sell it for more than $12. So there's a relationship that has something to do with something that has something to do with price, right? In this business, there are no such moorings. There is no such relationship. And to a great degree in the information product business, there is no such mooring either. Just to prove that we could do it, many, many years ago, I had a client who was a consultant on theft control to the supermarket and convenience store industry, and we sold from the front of the room a single audio cassette tape and a number 10 envelope with a piece of paper in it for $500. And they saw that's what they were getting. I mean, we didn't hide it. So you held up a tape and you held up an envelope with one piece of paper in it, and you sold it for $500. Now understand that you could sit with the folks at Nightingale Conant for the next decade and not convince them that you could sell a single cassette tape and a piece of paper in an envelope for $500. Okay? You could sit at Simon & Schuster for a decade and you couldn't convince them that you could do this. If you sat at NSA, you might convince a few people that you could do it, but then they would all report you to the ethics committee because they would think there was something unethical about selling a single cassette tape and a piece of paper in an envelope for $500. But see, it has to do with what's on the cassette tape and what's on the piece of paper, right? It doesn't have to do with the media. But traditionally and historically, there's a mooring. There's, okay, how many tapes in the box, times 10, times so much for the manual, here's how we get to a price. Well, this business has none of those moorings. And so you got to forget that they're even there. It all has to do with what's going on in here. And when I say that in order to succeed as a consultant coach, you have to be one, there's a certain, this is about now the attitudes reflected in behavior. There's a certain behavior that succeeds and a certain behavior that doesn't. There's like an issue of presence. All right? I mean, everyone up here at the table, they would be dressed differently in most cases if they were like taking money from people at the moment. Although, by the way, well, I'll talk about it when I get to costumes. But there's a presence to them when they stand up and talk about what they do. So this whole thing of being the thing in order to get the money is pretty important. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today is about what's going on internally, not just externally. So let's talk about some attitudes that are absolutely necessary. Here's page 3. First of all, what is your role? Well, your role as a consultant coach is not to be of service to clients. Being of service to clients implies you are a servant to clients. Mm-hmm. That's not what we do. Our role is actually to control clients and to attempt to get compliance from clients. All right. I often tell the story of my experience as a patient with chiropractors. And so the very first chiropractor I went to, I was having pretty severe back trouble at the time. I go in, and if you've ever, how many of you have been to chiro? Okay, you guys, you all know the drill, right? So they bring you in, they show you the x-rays, and they do the report of findings, and they tell you you got to come in 4 times a week for the first 3 weeks and 3 times a week for the next 6 weeks, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I know the drill too. I knew it when I went in. So I had sort of mentally prepared, so the doc gets done with the whole presentation. That's all fine, except, that's fine for ordinary people, but that's no good for me because, I got a bunch of stuff going on, and sometimes I got to jump on an airplane with a moment's notice, and I can't be scheduling appointments a week ahead of time, and so ultimately when we all get done, we've arrived at an arrangement that I'll come in when I want to, and I'll call them up a couple hours, and they'll squeeze me in. And how long do you think I kept going? Not very damn long. Mm-hmm. A few months later, I now go to my second chiropractor because, of course, my back problem is worse. And she does pretty much the same presentation. I do pretty much the same presentation. She now concludes the presentation by, walking out, coming back in with the yellow pages, opening it to chiropractors, and have a red pen in her hand and saying, let me mark 3 or 4 doctors I'd be happy to refer you to who will accept you on that basis and are very good doctors here in the community, but you can't be a patient here at this practice on that basis. Huh? Right? Well, because see, we have a relationship here. We're in a partnership to get you well. I can't do my part if you won't do your part, and I don't want any patients here who aren't going to get well, so I'm not going to accept you as a patient. Well, wait a minute. Maybe I can arrange my schedule, right? When I went back for my first adjustment, all chiropractors give you some kind of little Xerox piece of paper with little drawings of exercises on it that you're supposed to do, and they mark the number of reps on the blank line, right? You're supposed to do 8 of these, 4 of these, right? Which immediately goes under the car seat is where that goes. And so I go back for my first adjustment, and Dr. Patty says, how you doing with those 3 exercises? Oh, great, they're fabulous. Like I'm going to do these exercises, right? Get out of here. You know, well, show me exercise number 3. I want to make sure you're doing it right. You got to fess up, right? But I ain't doing it. I don't even know what exercise 3 is. The sheet's under the car seat. And I haven't got any intention of doing it. Just crack my back, and my neck, and let me get out of here. You know, I got things to do. Now, you got to go home. You can't be a patient here if you're not going to do your exercises. So we'll reschedule you for Thursday and come back in and be prepared to show me all 3 exercises before you get an adjustment. Well, you know, I'm stomping and pissed off, but I go, do the exercises, you know, come back, do the exercise. So, see, most doctors would think that their role is to be of service to the patient. But no, the role is to be the superior being in control in order to get compliance from the patient. So if you have an in-service attitude, the relationship is ordered in the wrong direction. If you have an in-service attitude, you give up control to the client. Second attitude, superiority. Nothing is more important to the successful consultant coach than complete disdain for everybody you're dealing with. That doesn't mean you don't like them, but you've got to really have in your head how incredibly ignorant and dysfunctional they all are. And I used to think, somebody asked me this question the other day, how much money do you have to take from somebody to get a smart person who can follow instructions? And I said, I used to think it was about that. You know, okay, we're only taking $30,000 from them, and they're behaving like idiots. Maybe if we took $300,000 from them, they take it more seriously and they behave better. No. It doesn't matter how much money you take from them. First of all, the entire universe continually reorders itself into 80-20 and 5-15 within the 20. It always reorders itself to that, no matter what you do. I don't care what you do. Doesn't make any difference how much money you take from them. Doesn't make any difference how much time you spend with them. Doesn't make any difference how much value you deliver to them. Doesn't matter how much legitimate expertise you have. None of that matters. Every little group reorders itself to 5, 15, and 80. And they keep doing it over and over and over again. So you could put 10 billionaires in a coaching program, and within 3 months you would realize that you had a sharp as a whip champion who was implementing everything, and you had really slow students. And they'd all be billionaires. Wouldn't make any difference. Right? And every time I keep thinking, well, maybe if we take more money from them, no. They can't get out of their own way. And actually, by the way, the ones running the big companies who are making $20 million a year as CEOs, they're like far more dysfunctional than you and I. I mean, it's a miracle. Believe me, it's a good thing they got a limo picking them up in the morning and getting them to work. There's a reason why those companies pay for that. It ain't a perk. It's like essential. Otherwise, they'd be roaming around out in the street, unable to find their way to the office with their Wall Street Journal under their arm. I mean, so look, you got the first big breakthrough, and actually, I'll tell you 3 quick stories. One is in 1978, after a year of making money as a speaker, doing things very dumb and very primitive and very painful, I went to my first National Speakers Association workshop, all excited, because now I was finally going to go figure out, how to do this smart. And this is a 3-day workshop. By the end of the first day, I'm like totally depressed, and spent the night in my hotel room instead of going anything, because it quickly became apparent to me that just about everybody was a better speaker than I was, but nobody knew how to make any money. And in fact, I was already making more money than most of them. And I'd come to find out how to make more money and make it smarter. And by the end of the day, I was convinced they're all making less money than I am, and they're doing even dumber shit than I'm doing. So this is not good, And so I'm like horribly depressed. By the next day, I'm like excited. Now I'm walking around thinking, okay, if these clowns doing what they're doing are like getting booked at all, right? By the 3rd day, I've convinced myself I'm an expert. And I'm at the airport ready to go home, and he's deceased now, Buster Crabbe. He was Flash Gordon and Tarzan way, way, way back when. And Buster Crabbe had been at the meeting, and he's sitting in the airport, and we're both flying back to Phoenix. And He said, so I say, what did you think of the meeting? And he says, I'm really depressed. I said, what are you depressed about? He says, well, I've been doing this thing. I've been getting some bookings, and I've been speaking, and I got a little book. But, I know I'm not making what I should be making doing this. And I came here to figure out I was going to be around all the smart pencils in the box and actually find out how to do what I'm doing smart. And it turns out I think I'm making more money than most of them. And I don't think they're even doing half the things I'm doing smart. What did you think of the meeting? I said, well, I thought the same thing of the meeting. He said, well, what's your background? So I'm advertising. So he says, well, how about if I hire you to redo all my stuff? Because you seem smarter than everybody else I met here. So now I'm on the airplane. I got a client. Right? So I got my first speaker is a consulting client because both of us came and decided everybody was a moron except us. So and he wants to give money to somebody, and I'm like the least moron he met. That's pretty much the deal. Okay. Well, so now by the time I get home, I'm going to say, okay, well, if he feels that way, so now I start a newsletter, and before you know it, I got 300 speakers paying me $200 a year for a newsletter, and I'm off to the races, right? And my disdain for the population has never changed. Now, that again, many of them are far better speakers than I am, and many of them are far better at one thing or another than I am. But generally speaking, they don't have any business sense. And those of you who do business consulting, generally speaking, everybody in every population doesn't have any business sense. My second experience, I'm still in the advertising business. And I go to meet on a Saturday with the CEO of the #1 ad agency in Cleveland, which admittedly, I know, world's tallest midget, but still, it's the #1 ad agency in Cleveland. And I get there, and this guy, they own their own building, and this guy is out, sleeves rolled up. It's a Saturday, but he's cutting the grass in front of his building. Now, first of all, the guy's cutting his own grass, right? So, unless this is your hobby, which for some people it is, but then you ought to do it out of sight of anybody if you're the CEO of the largest ad agency. So he's out cutting his own grass. As I get there and start talking to him, the wheels goes bad on the lawnmower. He picks the lawnmower up, he drags it from the front of the office building, with me tailing along talking to him, all the way to the back of the office building where there's a little workshop where there's a wrench that he can tighten the wheel on the lawnmower and then drag it all the way back to the front of the building to cut the grass. Now this guy's the CEO of the largest ad agency in Cleveland, and he ain't got enough sense to go get the wrench, right? I'm immediately feeling smarter and more powerful in this conversation because I'm thinking, this guy's an idiot. Weight Watchers. I get hired to work for Weight Watchers. The president of Weight Watchers at the time, very nice fellow. And I'm sure he was very good at something. I have no idea what, but he was very good at something. Okay? But we're all in a meeting where their ad agency, Benton, Barton, Durston, and Stupid, who's taken a lot of money from them, has come to show them their new TV commercials. And they show these TV commercials. These TV commercials are stick figure drawings of women talking to each other on a beach. Stick figures. You can draw it with a crayon. Talking to each other on a beach. And then a logo. And the lights come up, and everybody sits there waiting to see how he's going to react. He says, fabulous. Everybody says, fabulous. And everybody goes on their own. I said, Les, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. He said, it is. He said, but it can't be. It came from Benton, Barton, Durston, and Stupid. A very powerful lesson there. Okay? He don't know good advertising from bad advertising. He hasn't got a clue. Okay? But since they did it, and since he gave them a lot of money to do it, and they have a reputation in the advertising community, it must be good. Right? This is like taking somebody to a really fancy restaurant. The food's horrible, but they think it's good because it has to be, because they just paid $80 for it. And they're in a fancy place with 6 forks and a guy, no, bad food's bad food, no matter who it came from, right? But he don't know. And I'm sitting there thinking, this guy's running this whole company, and he's an idiot, you know? And then, what'd you pay for these things? Well, the production budget was $500,000. I mean, you need a kid and a crayon. You know, you could have done this on an Etch-a-Sketch, taken a picture of it. Well, I mean, you could produce this thing for 10 grand and have money left over. Are you nuts? Huh? But that's what Benton, Broughton, Durston, and Stupid told me it cost. Right? Real lessons there. So you've got to realize that while your clients may be good at something, and usually it's their technical competence at whatever it is that they do, that in the common sense department, which is mostly what coaching and consulting is all about, you are far superior to all of them. You are the superior being walking the planet, as dysfunctional as you may be. By comparison, trust me, you beat them all. I mean, I'm looking at the current crop of presidential candidates, right? Is there any of them you would hire and put in charge of anything? No, not a one of them, right? And one of them is going to wind up running the country, right? The country. What's the number one qualification necessary in order to run the country? The arrogance to think you should be running the country. That's it. I mean, you got one guy who was a mayor, you know, who did a pretty good job as a mayor, although he alienated every constituency he worked with. And, you know, his personal life is a god-awful mess. And he's got all kinds of business and financial problems. And pretty much what everybody's impressed about is that they got a mental picture in their head of him with a hard hat on after 9/11. And we're going to put him in charge. We're going to make him the leader of the free world. All right. The other guy's what? He's been in the Illinois state legislature for 4 years or some ridiculous thing. Hillary married well. On and on and on. I mean, I wouldn't put him in charge of 3 Dairy Queens in Indiana and walk away, and, you know, but there they are. And everybody's acting like they know something. Right? I mean, and believe me, their consultants are taking money from them by the bucket loads. By the bucket loads. So you need a sense of superiority. And you need to work on developing it. And the best way to develop superiority is to recognize and acknowledge the idiocy, ignorance, and inferiority of everybody else around you. Okay? I mean, it's nice to be walking around thinking, geez, I can't believe these people. First of all, they're doing well in spite of themselves. And it's a miracle they get to work in the morning. Incredible. Okay? Confidence. Donnie Deutsch's book, and Donnie, by the way, sold an ad agency for $300 million, which is a really good trick. So it begs studying Donnie Deutsch, because you are selling nothing. You got client, well, it's nothing. What's an ad agency business is nothing. I mean, it's clients, but they can leave, and it's employees, but they can leave. There's nothing. $300 million. Remarkable. The title of his book, it's one of those books you don't need to read it. It's like books you should just prop up somewhere so you see the covers, right? You know, I mean, the title of his book is Often Wrong, Never in Doubt. Okay? And that's the kind of confidence you need, because what people really want to buy from us is certainty. They do not want to buy maybes. They want to buy certainty. And they're happy to buy it if we're wrong the majority of the time. As long as the times we're right, the economic payoff's okay. But what they don't want to buy is maybes. Money. Attitudes about money. Well, we'll talk more about that tonight. But the biggest attitude about money you need to have is Stuart Wilde's line, when they show up, bill them. Nothing for free. Nothing. There's nothing more futile in life than dispensing free advice, unless you insist on dispensing free advice to a family member. All right? If they don't give you money for everything, for every step of the way, you will lose control of them. you will not get compliance, and you will lose their respect. Their respect for you is in direct correlation to the fact that they must give you money for everything. And don't make the mistake of, oh man, the guy's giving me $1 million a year, so I'll comp him to this. Big mistake. Big mistake. Don't comp him. You might give him a break, but don't comp him. Value. Real important to understand that in these businesses we are dealing with the client's value, not our beliefs about value. It's not about what we would buy. It's not about what we would pay. It's not about how we make decisions. I was with a client the other day who publishes a newsletter. The newsletter, for what it is, in terms of content for someone who would use it in its industry, is probably the best newsletter, the most useful newsletter, the most underpriced newsletter, and the most valuable newsletter I've ever seen. He has an enormous problem keeping subscribers because he's built the whole thing for people who actually use it, of which in a niche of 30,000 there might be 3. I like it because I'm happy to zip through it in a hurry. There's no fluff, there's no entertainment value, there's no personality, there's no nothing. There's just information, things to do. Great, I'm thrilled. Give me that thing, give me 5 minutes, a highlighter, let me find something to have somebody go fetch or somebody to go do, and I'm on to the next thing. There's him, me, and another 3 or 4 people. Okay? So you got to sell the newsletter for $100,000 a year. Okay? See, that's not, most people, that's not their value system. Now they may enunciate it, but it's not. So this business is about not the core value of the service. That has to be good. They got to get results from whatever you give them and so forth. But that's not what will keep them. That's not what will make you money. The value is about the results to the client's perception of the results, the relationship with the client. So we're going to talk a lot about how you create value, but the most important thing to know about value is it's all up to them. It's not up to you. And your attitudes about value have to switch to making them happy and having them want to continue in a relationship with you, not about the core value. See, Ron said a nifty thing. It goes from $1,100 to $30,000. I put the stuff in a better looking notebook. Well, that didn't help the value at all. You could deliver it in a paper sack. It wouldn't make any difference. But to the client, in part because they actually can't judge the value of the stuff that's in the notebook, so they don't have a basis for that. So the notebook's pretty important. Guy gives you $30,000, he expects a good looking notebook. Doesn't have a damn thing to do with the value. Okay? But he expects a good looking notebook, got to give him a good looking notebook. Last attitude has to do with the willingness to exercise power and control over people and being comfortable with doing so. Because this is all about controlling them. So the big speaker mistake in life is the attitude of, I'm going to do such a good seminar, and I'm going to give them so much information, and I'm going to teach them so much stuff that I don't have to have a hard sell presentation at the front of the room and do a value build and do a takeaway and control that whole sales process to drive it to the back of the room. They can recognize value. They'll just go back and buy. Right? There's like 2 speakers I've met in 30 years who get away with that. It doesn't work. Okay? Logically it should, but it doesn't work. Same thing in this business. Oh, well, if I put on a great meeting and I deliver great content and I'm a great coach and I really help them and their business improves and their income improves and their lifestyle improves and their health improves, I shouldn't have to do all this manipulative stuff in order to keep control of them and keep them giving me money. They'll recognize the value and it will take care of itself. No, it won't. They will leave you in spite of all the core value that you deliver for all sorts of other reasons. So you've got to get comfortable with very deliberately and strategically exercising a lot of control over other people. That's a very important thing. There's an article, I'm not going to take time with it now, but there's a really good article I stuck in for you on some of the pages about superpowers. But let's move past that and let's go to page 5. So here's, of the big things we're going to talk about today, here's big thing number 1. What you will be paid for ain't what you think you're getting paid for. And it's certainly not what your clients actually think they're paying for. And it's certainly not what peers in the industry would think they're paying for. What you're really getting paid for is your reputation. Far more so than your results, your output, the quality of your service. You see, the Weight Watchers story is such a good example because this $1 million a year CEO who's running a multi-million-dollar company owned by an even bigger conglomerate is making his entire decision on whether or not to run this ad campaign and spend another $1 million running it based on the reputation of Benton, Barton, Durston, and Stupid. He's not making it based on any objective standards. He's not making it based on any discernment of his own. He has none. He has no ability to tell whether it's good advertising or bad advertising. He's not making it based on anything except Benton, Barton, Durston, and Stupid made it. So what did they really get paid for? Did they get paid for the advertising? No. They got paid for their reputation. That's what they got paid for. What is reputation? Well, it's what they believe they know about you. It's very significant that that is not necessarily what you know about you, and it is for good or bad, and it is not necessarily the truth, good or bad. You could be the best financial planner on the planet, but if the clients and prospective clients don't know that about you, it is zero advantage. You could be the worst financial planner on the planet, but if they believe you're the best, it's an enormous marketing advantage. Over the years working with chiropractors, I've probably gotten adjustments from 300 of them. Right? The 10 best adjustments I ever got from the guys I believe are the 10 best chiropractors out of all of them are the poorest. The best chiropractors don't have the best incomes. Why? Because they think their income has to do with being the best chiropractor. No, it has everything to do with being known for being the best chiropractor. So it's about what do they believe about you. So where does that come from? Well, what do they surmise or assume about you? So why in all the years have I never been challenged about educational qualifications? For the most part, because the assumption is made. Well, you couldn't even be doing what you're doing without having them, so why ask about them? The vocabulary, the language, the way you carry yourself. So part of what they believe they know about you is purely based on their assumptions that they make about you. Everybody who has a published book immediately gets assumptive credit for being smart and being an expert on the subject. I know lots of authors, including myself, and neither of those things is necessarily true. Just because they got a book published with their name on it, which they may or may not have written, certainly doesn't guarantee any superior level of intelligence or any level of expertise on the topic. It actually requires, for about $15,000 you can get a really good mid-range ghostwriter who in about 2 weeks can put together a perfectly respectable book on just about any topic that can be researched on which you can slap your name. So all it really means is you were able to write a $15,000 check. That's what it really means. And it could mean nothing more than that. years ago, our friends at NSA, they don't do it anymore. They used to have an annual brochure contest. Now, the stupidity of this, to me, was obvious and immediate. Okay? That'd be relevant like if it was the National Graphic Artists Association, maybe, or the National Brochure Makers Association. But the National Speakers Association is having a best brochure contest. And so we took great trouble one year to make sure that Lee won. And so, were you first or second or third? What'd you get? First, yeah. So she got best brochure. Right? And she had the good sense and the lack of discretion to make the very comical statement that all it really proves is I give good brochure. And that's all it really proves. Right? But there's an assumption made. Ringer's story in Winning Through Intimidation is a useful story about all of that. So what else builds your reputation? What they are told about you by others. Right? So if you can engineer stories being told about you from person to person to person to person, that creates reputation. In fact, it says you have to attempt to govern the stories that are told about you from person to person to person to person, because those stories will control your reputation. Nobody will question the stories. Nobody will go investigate the stories. You never need to worry about that. The corollary is in hiring, obviously one of the first things you should do when you hire anybody is check references. Everybody gets references. You know what the national statistic is? How many people hiring people ever check a reference? 4%. 96% never make a call. They assume, well, if they listed them on the application as references, they're only going to say good things about them, so why bother calling them? Terrible assumption. I've called and had them say all sorts of bad things about the person. Okay? What they read or hear about you. Real important. So if you can get an article written about you, the book In Search of Excellence, he profiled some, 30 companies in Search of Excellence. What's the biggest commonality about the excellent companies that were profiled in Search of Excellence? Yeah, bankrupt. That's right. They're all broke. Okay? They all went broke. Okay? They may have been excellent for a while, but then they were gone. Arguably, they might have been putting too much emphasis on one thing, excellence. But, well, no, I'm deadly serious, by the way. Think about it. There's something wrong there. There's another commonality there to be found in those companies that led to them all going broke that would be equally useful to know, if not more useful to know, than the commonality that they were all briefly excellent. All right? But my point is, getting your company written about in that book for a period of time, it drove your stock price up. It caused people to want to come and do business with you, do joint ventures with you, buy you, merge with you, acquire you, be acquired by you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because they read about you in Search of Excellence. And the In Search of Excellence book said you were an excellent company, so you must be an excellent company. Why? Because that's what I read about you. Well, first of all, a third of the companies were, of course, clients of the consulting company that Peter's worked for, so there's sort of a mixed agenda of deciding that they're the most excellent. But they read it, it must be true. And so what they read about you controls reputation. Now here's what's really useful to know about that. There's not a great deal of distinction between what they read about you in real media and what they read about you in false media. Most don't make the distinction. There was a thing on 2020 last night. The pharmaceutical companies It's actually kind of comical. The pharmaceutical companies are literally stealing all of the strategies and ideas that we've used in the illegitimate alternative health business for years that we go to jail for. The FTC doesn't bother them because they're pharmaceutical companies, so they're stealing everything we always did and doing it. And so they showed last night, it's really pretty funny. There's whatever pharmaceutical company it is, they got a new prescription drug to keep you awake. Right? So, because people are falling asleep. So they got this pill. By the way, all the research on it actually shows that it does less. In shift workers versus the placebo, it kept them awake 1.74 minutes longer. A cup of coffee bought 3.6 minutes. But we're going to put everybody on the drug, right? God bless that industry. But here's the promotion piece that they've got for the drug. They've got a fake American Medical Association Journal of Clinical Psychiatry, and it looks just like the real thing. Full of articles written by doctors that look just like real peer-reviewed articles. But of course, all the doctors are on the payroll one way or another of the pharmaceutical company. There is no peer review, so the articles are really written by copywriters like me, and the whole thing is being sent out to the doctors, and they can't tell it apart from their regular journal of clinical something or other. And now, we do this, by the way, we all go to jail in the alternative health business, but in the real health business, apparently now it's okay. And it worked like gangbusters. So all sorts of people, its intent was to get them to prescribe the drug for off-label purposes, right? It's supposed to be being prescribed to like airline pilots and truck drivers and, you know, people who need to stay awake. Now it's being prescribed as an antidepressant because this fake journal that went out to all these doctors has told them what they're not allowed to tell them on the label, and the fake media is every bit as good as the good media. Okay? Very important for you to get it. What they read about you is extremely powerful, but what they read about you in the Wall Street Journal is only a little bit more powerful than what they read about you in the Excellence Street Journal that looks like the Wall Street Journal, but exists only because we made it up. What legends they hear repeated about you. It's really important to like create, tell, and retell, and tell a lot, a handful of defining stories about yourself that are likely to be retold. Because when they are retold and retold and retold, they take root. Better that they are true, by the way, or embellished from a place of truth. But as a practical matter, it wouldn't matter. Fifth, who you are associated with and who they associate you with in their minds. Right? Now that's really important, especially for someone who does not yet have a reputation in the market in which they are pursuing and wishes to create it. An aura borrowed is nearly as good as an aura owned. K-Fed is actually able to earn money. A remarkable tribute to one thing and one thing only. Being seen with and briefly married to Britney Spears. And he is actually able to make money with no talent, no ability, no brains. I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it? There's a comedian, first name is Tom, I forget his last name, up in years. Made a very good living for many, many years. And stored his money, so he's very wealthy. Some of you would know him if I could think of his name. Thank you. Yeah, what's his last name? Dreesen. Tom Dreesen. And no disrespect, but he's a journeyman comedian. I mean, as stand-up comedians go, if we had a scale of 1 to 10, we'd probably make him a 5. All right? But Dreesen's career was totally based on the fact that Frank Sinatra let him open for him. Steve and Edie Gourmet, their career was built on Frank Sinatra. I'm not sure they could have built a career just on Steve and Edie Gourmet. But by borrowing an aura, they were able to build a very sustainable career. So who you are seen with, who you are associated with, who you co-author an article with, who you interview for an article, who you interview on a tape, who you hang out with, who you reference in your language and in your stories, who you tell stories about as if you knew them, all of that adds to your reputation. Longtime client of mine owns a business talk radio station. Actually owns 2 of them now. And he has a show of his own, which really is designed to promote his investment management firm. But one of the things that he was very good at from the beginning, when all he had was a tiny little show on in San Antonio, and he only had a few $1 million under management, and he now has hundreds of millions of dollars under management, is he was very good at conning people like Henry Kissinger and Alan Greenspan and John Travolta, and the list is long, to be interviewed on his radio show, which was a bought and paid for fake radio show on a dink-ass station in San Antonio. And purely because they never asked, and he had the cojones to chase them, he got Alan Greenspan, for example, who almost never gives interviews to anybody, to be interviewed on his show 8, 10, 12 times. And Henry Kissinger to be interviewed on the show, and on and on and on and on and on. And he intelligently mixed financial people of stature and credibility with celebrities of no stature or credibility other than that they are celebrities. And so he surrounded himself and associated himself with these people. I'm always amused, and I have some clients who I've gotten on the show. I'm always amused when people then go on the show, and now they will list it in their promotional material that they were on so-and-so's show, right, on such and such a station, which means nothing to anybody. Because even though it's now a bigger show and it's a real show and it's in Houston, unless you're in Houston, nobody knows who the hell he is. It doesn't make any difference. But you could say, appeared on the Daniel Frischberg show with such people as Alan Greenspan, Henry Kissinger, John. Now the implication is you're all on the show at the same time together. Okay? But what people want to draw from that is up to them. It's just like in the speaking business, we use the language shared the platform with, and then this long list of people. Well, that implies we were all out there on a platform together. No, it might have been 3 days apart, but they were on the same platform I was. We were on the same event. It doesn't mean we don't know each other. We didn't talk to each other. We weren't in the same room at the same time, but you get to use their names, and you get to associate yourself with them. So this business is about creating a reputation that you become known for. Flip the page. First thing to do is decide what it's going to be. All about decision. Who do you want to be? You want to be the wise old grizzled veteran of your industry? Do you want to be, the arrogant young punk who annoys everybody? Do you want to be obnoxious? Do you want to be warm and fuzzy? Do you want to be, what do you want to be? You get to decide because you're making it up from scratch. Okay? And of course you ought to pick based on what's going to be effective for you. Now, you can't totally be something you aren't, so you got to pick characteristics, that you can work with. But effectiveness is what it's all about. So there's decisions to be made about what you are going to set out to make yourself known as and known for. You're known for competencies. You're known as a type of person.